This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings.
Good evening. We begin tonight with great expectations. It's been another day of coast-to-coast speculation about what the president is going to say in his State of the Union address about getting the economy moving again. It is clearly a subject on everyone's mind. The president warned today against what he called election year gimmicks, but he said again, no details now, wait until next week. Well, some of Mr. Bush's advisors are worried that the waiting game is getting somewhat out of hand. At the White House tonight, ABC's Ann Compton.
This morning, there were two more attempts by the Bush White House to show a president poised to deliver a dramatic and detailed strategy for helping the economy.
We are working hard on a State of the Union message for next week. I believe that people that think as you do will be pleased with the results. You stay tuned for the next chapter. It'll be coming out.
But alarm bells have gone off among Republicans who worry it may be impossible to meet the high expectations set for the address by the president and his staff. Chief speechwriter Tony Snow is saying the address will set the tone for the next 5 years. And an official campaign memo to corporate supporters calls it the defining moment of the Bush presidency. In private, the president's political friends call the hype crazy, stupid, setting the president up for a fall. In public, conservative Republicans worry he cannot deliver the tough policies that have been promised.
If he doesn't, I think he'll get torn apart, not on the details, but on the fact that, here's a guy who just doesn't know what he wants to do, and he can't afford any more of that.
Much of the president's economic plan has already leaked out, and that's another problem. Some of his friends say it is not the kind of bold stroke that lives up to its advanced billing. So does the critic running against him in New Hampshire.
I believe that the tax cuts Mr. Bush is about to propose are anemic and pathetic.
Some of the president's allies also warn if the president does try to cram more into his plan to meet the expectations he created, the message may come out muddled, and that will only confuse the voters. Ann Compton, ABC News, the White House.
In all the speculation about what Mr. Bush will recommend to get the economy moving again, there has been a great deal of talk about capital gains and tax breaks for the middle class. Almost lost in all this is the fact that some economists think the president should consider another option, doing nothing at all. Here's our economics editor, Stephen Ogg.
These are the faces of a recession. Unemployment lines, empty automobile showrooms, businesses shut down, unsold houses. The question for politicians is, would cutting taxes and putting some more money into the hands of consumers fix that? John Albertine used to be an economist with the Congressional Joint Economic Committee, which studied election year tax cuts. He said it is often better not to have one.
Our experience since World War II is that by the time the Congress figures out that there's a recession and then goes through its cumbersome process and enacts a tax reduction, the recession is long over. And so the tax reduction doesn't affect the recession, it affects the period of the recovery.
There is concern that if a tax cut were to go into effect after the recession, it would increase consumer spending, overheat the economy, and push inflation and interest rates up. All of that could eventually lead to a recession. Many economists agree with Henry Aaron, who does research on taxation at the Brookings Institution. He says the least dangerous course would be to leave taxes alone and let the Federal Reserve continue doing what it's been doing.
If the Fed will aggressively pursue a policy of keeping interest rates as low as possible, they will be doing a good deal and enough to help pull the economy out of recession.
Another argument against a tax cut is that it would cut revenues and add to the federal deficit, which could be the biggest economic problem in the long run. But this is an election year, and few politicians are going to worry about that. Stephen Ogg, ABC News, Washington.
Japanese-American relationship in the news again today. Vice President Quayle said today that America's trade relationship with Japan has not reached a crisis point. It is improving, he said, and to suggest otherwise is, in his words, mindless Japan bashing. But another sign today of how much tension there is on this subject. Last night, you may recall, the commissioners in Los Angeles voted to cancel a contract with a Japanese firm to build railway cars because they have been pressured to keep the business in the United States. Today, another move to keep another group of Japanese businessmen from investing in the country. Here's ABC's Bob Jameson.
Seattle fans have feared for months that their money-losing Mariners would be bought by an outsider who would move the team to another city. Today, there was an offer from a group that said it would keep them in Seattle, but attention focused on the fact most of the new owners would be Japanese. More than half of the $100 million purchase price would come from Hiroshi Yamauchi, president of Japan's Nintendo, the video game maker. The club's chairman would be Minoru Arakawa, president of Nintendo of America, who has lived in Seattle for 15 years. Republican Senator Slade Gorton supports the move.
Mr. Yamauchi and Nintendo of America did not seek this opportunity out. We sought them out.
But Commissioner Fay Vincent, citing baseball's policy against investors from outside the United States and Canada, immediately threw cold water on the idea.
We'll look at it, but I would think it's unlikely.
But in Seattle, the Japanese, who pledged to make the fifth-place finishers a contender, were seen as something the fans could live with.
As long as they stay here, I don't care who buys them.
I think it's a neat opportunity for the Mariners to be purchased by a strong local group, and I think it's a neat opportunity to keep the Mariners in Seattle.
All of this may prove to be an interesting dilemma for Major League owners who must give approval. They may be faced with rejecting a bid from the Japanese that would keep the Mariners in Seattle in favor of one from Americans that would move the team to another city. Bob Jamieson, ABC News, New York.
Another note on the general subject, the Japanese Parliament has made a gesture to the U.S. It will add to its official fleet of cars 2 American models, Buick Park Avenues, $46,000 each. They cost about $30,000 here, but add transportation, taxes, inspection fees, and you have the higher price in Japan. On Wall Street today, the Dow Jones Industrials were down 29 points to close at 32.26, and the trading was heavy. In just a moment, some of the other news. International promises of help for the Soviet Union, but only a few specifics. On the American agenda tonight, people with disabilities. A new law says they must be treated like the rest of us. And the threat of an Olympic basketball boycott sparked by the fear of AIDS.
This is World News Tonight with Peter Jennings. Brought to you by Ralston Purina Company of Checkerboard Square.
Boris Yeltsin warned the 26,000 farms that are owned by the state turn a profit or lose the land. In Washington, representatives from 47 nations who are trying to figure out the best ways to help Russia and the other republics get through their immediate economic crisis finished a 2-day conference. They've had more success describing the problems than coming up with solutions. Here's ABC's John McWethy.
In a move designed to capture world attention, Secretary Baker announced the U.S. next month would begin a military airlift lasting 2 weeks.
During this time, the United States Air Force will fly 54 sorties of critical medical and food shipments to cities in Russia and the new independent states.
All the supplies, worth an estimated $60 million, are leftovers from the Persian Gulf War. German Foreign Minister Genscher, who praised the U.S. move as reminiscent of the airlift that saved Berlin in the late 1940s, could not resist pointing out that Germany has already flown 6 times as many aid missions to the new republics. Though no country announced it was committing new funds, American officials say dozens pledged to help in creative new ways. From the Persian Gulf, for example, Oman promised to help with $200 million to help develop oil production. Argentina said it would absorb up to 100,000 refugees. Thailand pledged a $450 million loan so the republics could buy Thai rice. And all the East European countries who are struggling today because they were once part of the Soviet Empire said even they would open up their ports and rail systems to help move supplies. For many, the last 2 days have provided a first unpleasant look at the depth and complexity of the problem. It is now clear that when a country that covers 1/6 of the world's landmass breaks into pieces, it will take much more than just one conference to figure out how to help. John McWethy, ABC News, the State Department.
President Bush is reportedly considering another major arms control initiative. Despite reductions in the last couple of years, the most destructive weapons of the U.S. and the former Soviet nuclear arsenals have remained intact. Those are the missiles that deliver multiple warheads. The U.S. is apparently ready to start getting rid of them. Our Pentagon correspondent is Bob Zelnick.